Welcome to the Feminist Park Podcast. I'm Kwame.
And I'm Leilani. It's great to be kicking off this journey with you all today.
Yeah, we're diving into work that's really closely tied to the vision behind the Feminist Park Project, which was founded by Hussein Stuck.
That project's goal is pretty ambitious, isn't it? Imagining these truly equitable public spaces, starting with the idea for an intersectional feminist park right here in Berlin.
Exactly. And this podcast, well, it's kind of an extension of that. We're going to be digging into the academic research that, supports and informs that kind of vision.
We'll be taking these dense, sometimes quite academic papers and really pulling out the core and insights.
And looking at them through specific lenses, things like environmental justice, intersectionality, anti-colonial thought, queer theory.
All the stuff that helps us think critically about space. Do you remember those first few weeks, early 2020? The world just, it stopped, didn't it?
It really did, a sudden halt.
Yeah, and your entire universe seemed to shrink, maybe just to the four walls of your living room, or perhaps even just your bedroom.
A global experiment in isolation, really. Unprecedented.
It was. And for countless people, it had this profound impact on mental health. You saw widespread feelings of stress, anxiety, that deep, gnawing loneliness setting in.
Absolutely. It was a huge shock to the system.
Now imagine experiencing all that, but not in your home city, not surrounded by familiar faces or your usual support systems. Imagine being thousands of miles from home.
That adds a whole other layer of difficulty.
Exactly. For certain groups, like international students navigating a new country, this burden of isolation was, the research calls it a double burden.
A double burden, makes sense.
They were grappling with the terrifying global pandemic, sure, but also dealing with cultural shifts, maybe language barriers, and often just this stark absence of their established support networks back home.
It's a lot to handle all at once.
So today, we're embarking on a deep dive. We're looking into how one specific, often overlooked resource became an absolutely crucial lifeline during this period of intense stress and uncertainty.
And that resources.
Urban green spaces.
Yeah.
UGS. We're talking about everything from, sprawling city parks and community gardens to even just those quiet tree-lined streets that maybe offered a brief moment of respite.
Ah, okay. Interesting angle.
This isn't just about pretty amenities or like a touch of nature for aesthetic appeal. It's about essential, vital infrastructure for human well-being.
Okay.
Especially when our traditional support structures are suddenly taken away.
Right. When the usual ways of coping disappear.
Okay, let's unpack this.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, and what a global crisis like a pandemic so starkly reveals, is the fundamental human need for connection. It really brings it to the surface.
Connection with people, you mean?
Yes, but not just connection with other people, also with nature itself and with a tangible sense of community.
Oh, okay. Nature and community.
Exactly. And when those traditional avenues for forging these connections, things like university clubs, cafes, even just bustling city squares when they're abruptly shut down, well, the importance of accessible public spaces becomes glaringly, undeniably obvious.
Suddenly they're not just nice to have, they're essential.
Precisely. And we're diving into a really powerful qualitative study today that gives voice to this profound, often deeply emotional experience. It shows us the astonishing impact these green spaces had, sometimes quite unexpectedly.
That's a perfect way to set the scene. Our focus today is on a paper titled Urban Green Space Interaction and Wellbeing, Investigating the Experience of International Students in Berlin During the First COVID-19 Lockdown.
Right. Collins, Haas, Highland, and Kabish, 2022.
That's the one, published in 2022. Now, loads of studies globally looked at how people used urban green spaces during the pandemic, right?
Yes, there was a surge of interest, understandably.
But this one, it really stands out.
Really?
Because instead of just broad statistics, it offers such a nuanced, qualitative lens. It zeroes in on a specific and particularly vulnerable population group.
The international students in Berlin.
Exactly. International students aged 20 to 30 who were living in Berlin during those initial, really disorienting lockdown months.
And that specificity is important.
It really is. You might be wondering, why that particular demographic? What makes their experience so unique?
Well, being an international student often involves unique stressors anyway, even without a pandemic.
Precisely. As the paper vividly notes, their experience of isolation, uncertainty, and, like we said, often a profound lack of familiar support networks was significantly amplified.
Right.
I mean, imagine being in a foreign city, maybe you've only just arrived, you're away from your family, navigating a new culture, maybe still struggling with the language.
And then bam, a global pandemic hits.
Yeah. Everything you might have relied on for connection, your university courses, new friendships you were just starting to make, even just exploring the city, it's all shut down.
That must have been incredibly tough.
The study highlights how these pre-existing stressors, things often including language barriers, financial worries, the absence of those established social safety nets.
Which Sherry and colleagues talked about back in 2010.
Exactly. These were severely exacerbated. It turned an already challenging situation into an intensely isolating one.
It really paints a picture of vulnerability.
And what truly captured my attention about this study, what made me think, okay, we have to talk about this, is its methodology.
Ah, the qualitative approach.
Yes. Instead of relying on broad surveys or just crunching numbers, it used semi-structured interviews.
Which means, for listeners maybe not familiar,
it's like getting a direct window into someone's inner world. It allowed participants to share their personal stories, their raw emotions, and the truly nuanced lived experiences of how they connected with urban green spaces during such a profoundly challenging time.
So you get the why and the how, not just the what.
Exactly. This qualitative approach is absolutely crucial for understanding the depth and the meaning of their connection to these spaces. It's not just about usage numbers. It's about the felt experiences, the solace found, the frustrations maybe endured, the memories created there.
The human story behind the data.
Precisely. So the core mission of this paper, it was to investigate a few key things. First, how the sudden, radical changes in daily routines created unexpected opportunities for these students to interact with urban green spaces in new ways.
Okay, changes in routine leading to new interactions.
Second, how those experiences themselves transformed over the lockdown period. Did they change? Did feelings change?
Right, the evolution of the experience.
And most importantly, how this interaction with green spaces impacted their emotional responses and overall well-being during what was, let's face it, an incredibly stressful and isolating period.
So the link between UGS use and mental health in this specific context.
Yes. It's really a deep dive into resilience, adaptation, and maybe the unexpected sources of comfort we find in crisis. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Indeed. And it's important to understand this study isn't operating in a vacuum, is it? It builds on a really robust body of existing research that has consistently highlighted the profound potential of urban green spaces.
Like what kind of research?
Well, we're talking about their power for psychological restoration, their ability to reduce stress, and their capacity to foster crucial social contact. Foundational stuff.
Okay.
Think of the work by researchers like Kaplan and Kaplan way back in 1989 who really pioneered our understanding of restorative environments.
Right. Attention restoration theory.
Exactly. Or later studies by people like Maas and colleagues in 2009, Rowe and others in 2013, which demonstrated the physiological and psychological benefits of nature contact.
Physiological too, like measurable effects.
Oh, yes. These scholars have long shown us that simply being in green spaces can contribute to lower blood pressure, reduced heart rate, decreased muscle tension, and a significant improvement in overall mental health markers.
Wow. So it's not just feeling better, your body actually responds.
Precisely. And what this current study does so powerfully by focusing on a crisis scenario like a pandemic lockdown is it reinforces and really amplifies those earlier findings.
How so?
It specifically examines how urban green spaces actively helped mitigate or, reduce the severe negative mental health impacts that were brought on by the unprecedented isolation of the lockdown. It puts that restorative power to the ultimate test, in a way.
Okay, I see.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the picture of how we design and manage our cities, the findings underscore urban green spaces, not just as environmental amenities, nice to haves that add a bit of beauty.
Which is how they're often treated, maybe.
Often, yes. But this study suggests they should be seen as absolutely critical public health infrastructure.
Public health infrastructure? Like hospitals or sanitation?
In terms of impact on well-being, yes. Especially crucial for mental health during times of crisis. The authors themselves concluded that for this vulnerable subgroup of international students, urban green spaces, and I quote, became a reliable constant and a valuable public health resource.
Reliable constant. In a world that felt anything but constant.
Exactly. They were a fundamental support system in an incredibly uncertain, rapidly shifting world. That's from their abstract.
That's a profound shift, isn't it? in how we might view these spaces. It suggests they should be considered on par with other essential services, maybe like clean water or public transport.
That's the implication, I think.
So what does this profound shift actually mean for how we fund these spaces, how we prioritize them in urban planning, or even how we, just as citizens, perceive their value?
Well, it means everything, really. If we truly recognize UGS as critical public health infrastructure, it fundamentally changes their political priority. It has to.
So more budget, more attention.
It demands more consistent, robust funding, absolutely. Not just for mowing the lawns, but for strategic development, for ensuring equitable access across different neighborhoods.
Equitable access, that's key.
Crucial. It also shifts public perception. You move from seeing a park as merely a place for recreation, maybe walking the dog, to understanding it as a crucial element of a healthy, resilient city, a non-negotiable component of our urban fabric.
And for us, as individuals?
For individuals, it reinforces the idea that access to nature isn't a luxury. It's, well, arguably it's a human right, especially when other resources are scarce or inaccessible.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for our deeper dive then. This study, as you said, it provides incredibly rich data, even if it wasn't explicitly designed with what we call an intersectional framework in its initial methods.
Right, it didn't set out with specific hypotheses about gender versus class versus race, for example.
Exactly. But the data it gathered, these personal stories, allow us to examine the experiences of these international students through various critical lenses anyway. We can look at how different facets of their identity and circumstances undeniably shape their interaction with urban green spaces.
And how those spaces, in turn, supported or perhaps even challenged their well-being.
Right. So let's start by applying a feminist and gender perspective.
Okay. When we look at urban spaces through this lens, we're thinking not just about specific gender roles, but also about the broader experience of vulnerability, of safety, of access in public spaces.
Things that often impact women and gender-diverse people differently.
Exactly. These are dimensions that historically and currently disproportionately affect many women and gender-diverse individuals. Now, while the article doesn't explicitly focus on distinct gendered patterns of use, like saying women used parks this way, men that way.
It wasn't tracking that specifically.
No, but it does offer crucial insights into the nuanced pressures faced by those often in caregiving roles.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, for example, interviewee number 3 highlights how, quote, changes in behavior and social distancing outside had become a high-stress factor for parents who had to ensure that their children were at a safe distance to others when playing outside.
Right. Keeping kids apart during a pandemic, that sounds stressful.
Immensely.
Yeah.
And while the statement doesn't specify the gender of the parent, we know that in many societies, caregiving responsibilities, especially for young children in public, still predominantly fall upon women.
That's often the case, yeah.
So this indirectly illuminates the potentially gendered burden of navigating public spaces safely with children during this time. It adds these unique pressures that often weigh more heavily on mothers or female guardians.
It's not just about your own safety, but managing others, too.
Exactly. It speaks to the constant vigilance and mental load required, even in spaces meant for relaxation and play. For a parent, ensuring a child's safety and adherence to new, maybe confusing, rules becomes an additional, often exhausting layer of responsibility.
Which might prevent them from actually finding that restoration for themselves in the park.
Precisely. They're managing risk rather than relaxing. Furthermore, the broader issue of perceived safety, which is inherently gendered in many ways.
You mean feeling safe walking alone, especially after dark, things like that?
Yes, those baseline concerns. But it becomes even more pronounced when we consider the policing of public spaces mentioned in the study.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
The incident described by interviewee number 6, where police officers allegedly targeted young LGBT+ identifying people, speaks volumes about whose presence is deemed appropriate and who feels allowed in public spaces.
Right, who belongs there.
Exactly. This challenges the very notion of public spaces as universally welcoming and safe, an issue many women and gender-diverse individuals face daily, lockdown or not.
So the policing itself wasn't neutral.
Well, aggressive policing in this context isn't just about enforcing lockdown rules impartially. It can reflect and reinforce patriarchal or heteronormative enforcement standards. It ends up dictating who has a right to occupy space and express themselves freely in public.
That's a powerful and deeply unsettling point about perceived safety and who belongs in public spaces. And it leads us directly, doesn't it, into a queer theory perspective.
It absolutely does.
Let's zero in on that particularly striking finding from the study, because directly speaks to non-normative uses of space and really challenges the often invisible assumptions of heteronormative urban design.
Right, the idea that public space is designed assuming certain kinds of users and behaviors.
Yeah, this deep dive truly uncovers how urban green spaces became a crucial space for the LGBTQIA+ community during lockdown, but also the inherent tensions that arose when their chosen safe spaces were policed differently.
Absolutely. The direct quote from interviewee number 6 is incredibly revealing and critical here. They describe police targeting groups of young LGBT+ identifying people with very aggressive policing.
Aggressive policing.
Yes, stating, and I'm quoting directly here, they'd scare all of the queers out of the park, and then you'd turn around and see those at least straight-appearing people or whatever having their party and being completely left alone.
Wow. That's blatant.
It's incredibly stark, and this isn't just an isolated anecdote, right? It's a stark illustration of how public space is often policed through a lens of social norms, which are frequently heteronormative.
Meaning they implicitly assume and prioritize straight cisgender experiences.
Precisely. Straight cisgender forms of socializing. And for the LGBTQIA+ community, during lockdown, urban green spaces had taken on this vital, almost unprecedented role.
Because their usual spaces were closed.
Exactly. With traditional indoor venues like bars and clubs, which often serve as historical and contemporary safe spaces for queer socializing and community building being closed, parks became, as the study notes, a safe space to socialize outdoors.
A crucial alternative.
A crucial alternative for community building, finding support, maintaining social connections when other options were unavailable, and perhaps, crucially, when maybe home wasn't a safe or affirming space either.
That's a really important point.
So the aggressive policing described, it wasn't merely about enforcing general lockdown rules for everyone equally, or at least that's the perception.
It felt targeted.
It felt targeted. As the interviewee suggests, it was about enforcing social norms and actively excluding certain groups. It challenged their right to occupy public space, to express themselves authentically, and to find community in a place that should, by definition, be for all.
It undermines the whole idea of public space.
It really does.
Yeah.
This highlights a fundamental problem that urban planners and policymakers often overlook. If a space is truly public, it should be equally accessible and safe for all expressions of community, provided they adhere to basic rules of public conduct. It has to be about equity, not just equality enforcing dominant norms.
Equity, right.
Right.
Not just treating everyone the same if their starting points are different.
Precisely. What's truly fascinating here is how UGS became this social melting pot, as the paper calls it, during the pandemic, a place where many different kinds of sociality converged.
Lots of different people using parks in new ways.
Yes, but this melting pot was clearly not equally safe or accessible for all, especially when non-normative expressions of sociality like queer groups gathering were apparently policed more harshly.
So it wasn't a level playing field even within the park.
It seems not, according to this account.
Yeah.
This experience brings to light a critical challenge for truly inclusive urban design. How do we create spaces where everyone, regardless of their identity, feels not just tolerated, but genuinely welcomed, safe, and free from discriminatory scrutiny or enforcement?
It's a huge question.
It is. It's about ensuring that the freedom and liberation these spaces offer are universal, not conditional, not subject to biased interpretation by authorities or other users.
That's a powerful indictment of how power dynamics can play out in public spaces, even under the guise of public health measures. Shifting gears now, let's think about the migrant and racial justice perspective. The very premise of this study, focusing on international students, immediately puts a direct spotlight on migrant experiences.
Absolutely. By definition.
These individuals are, by definition, navigating a new urban environment, often without those established support systems we talked about, making their perspective invaluable for this lens.
Precisely. And the article explicitly highlights this unique vulnerability. It states that international students suffered a double burden of social isolation and resulting deprivation.
The double burden again.
Yes. And it emphasizes that this wasn't simply the universal experience of lockdown. It was significantly exacerbated by pre-existing stressors that are distressingly common among migrant communities.
Like what specifically?
Well, we're talking about profound challenges like language barriers. Imagine trying to understand rapidly changing health directives in a language you're still learning.
Oh, that would be terrifying.
Exactly. Financial concerns, too. Maybe precarious work situations vanished overnight, or dependence on family back home who were also struggling. And that profound lack of established support networks, being far from family, far from familiar social safety nets.
All those things Sherry and colleagues mentioned.
Yes, precisely. These cumulative factors made them particularly susceptible to the negative mental health impacts of the pandemic. It turned an already difficult situation into an intensely precarious one.
So the baseline was already stressful, and the pandemic just amplified it hugely.
Hugely. What's particularly illuminating, though, is the striking contrast many interviewees drew between their experience in Berlin and the situations in their home countries.
Oh, what did they say?
Many expressed feeling incredibly grateful, that was interviewee 6, and profoundly lucky to be in Berlin, specifically because urban green spaces largely remained open and accessible throughout the lockdown.
So policy decisions made a direct difference to their well-being.
A massive difference. They vividly contrasted this with the situation in their home cities. One interviewee specifically mentioned São Paulo, where green spaces were often closed entirely or simply insufficient to meet the burgeoning public demand. People were forced indoors without respite.
So their friends and family back home had it even worse.
According to the interviewees, yes. Their friends and family back home were reportedly envious of the freedom to use these spaces in Berlin. That envy speaks volumes, doesn't it? About a global inequity in access to basic coping mechanisms.
It really does. So this contrast, what does it tell us from a migrant and racial justice perspective?
Well, it clearly demonstrates how policies around public space access during a crisis can have vastly different, almost life or death impacts on migrant populations. Access to these spaces directly influence their sense of belonging, their mental health, their overall ability to cope with an intensely stressful and uncertain situation.
So where you happen to be living during a crisis dramatically changes your ability to cope based on park access.
Absolutely. Their experiences highlight systemic differences in urban planning priorities and the equitable distribution of public space across the globe. Some cities, like Berlin in this case, inadvertently offered a vital resource that alleviated some of the unique pressures on migrants. Others, perhaps by closing their green spaces, compounded the stress for their residents, particularly vulnerable groups like those far from home.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it underscores how access to urban green spaces is fundamentally a matter of environmental and social justice. It's not just about trees.
Not at all. For those who may lack private green space, which is a common issue for students in shared housing, or for migrant communities, perhaps in less affluent neighborhoods, and who also lack robust social networks in their new environment.
Which is the definition of the study group.
Right. Public green spaces become an even more critical, almost existential resource. It's not just about quality of life improvements. It's about basic well-being, mental survival sometimes.
Yeah.
Ensuring equitable access to high-quality, safe, and welcoming urban green spaces isn't just about aesthetics or property values. It's about providing essential support for mental and physical well-being and fostering genuine inclusion within a city. Especially for those navigating complex transitions and facing multiple layers of vulnerability, it's a systemic issue demanding systemic solutions.
That brings us neatly then to the class and socioeconomic perspective. Because it's clear from the study that economic situations, living situations, significantly influenced both the urgent need for and the actual use of urban green spaces during the lockdown.
Absolutely. This wasn't just about preference. For many, it was about necessity.
How did the study show that?
Well, the article explicitly notes that, quote, typical student living situations such as shared flats with little or no outdoor space is likely to have also influenced individuals' need to leave the home and seek restoration in outdoor green space.
Right. No balcony, no garden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a direct, undeniable link to socioeconomic status. Many students, particularly international students, often reside in smaller, more affordable, and frequently shared accommodations. These places often offer minimal or no private outdoor space, no balcony, no garden, maybe not even a window that opens onto anything green.
So you're just inside
All
the
things,
time.
pretty much. Interviewee number 6 vividly describes the feelings of claustrophobia that arose from these confined conditions. You're just always there together, and sometimes you really just need that space.
I can only imagine.
This highlights a core class-based disparity, doesn't it? While wealthier individuals might retreat to private gardens, larger homes, or even country estates during a lockdown, many others are confined to cramped urban dwellings with no natural escape route.
A very different lockdown experience depending on your living situation.
Totally different. So for these students, parks and other publicly accessible green spaces became, as interviewee 2 put it, an extension of personal space.
An extension of their home, essentially.
Yes, they offered a vital, often the only, escape when home environments felt cramped, stressful, and offered no respite or opportunity for solitude. This emphasizes how publicly accessible green spaces effectively compensate for a fundamental lack of private space.
A lack which is almost always tied to socioeconomic status.
Almost always. These public spaces become not just desirable amenities, but truly essential for mental and physical health for those without private alternatives. They are literally the difference between feeling trapped and finding a breath of fresh air, finding psychological space.
So they're filling a gap created by housing inequality.
In a very real way, yes. Furthermore, the discussion section of the article elevates the importance of UGS beyond just environmental benefits or aesthetic value. It highlights that green space is not just an environmental, but also a social good.
A social good? What does that mean in this context?
It directly correlates with the finding by Rawl and colleagues back in 2017 that urban green spaces offer vital cultural ecosystem services.
Cultural ecosystem services. That sounds a bit academic.
It does, but in simple terms, they are the non-material benefits people gain from ecosystems. Things like spiritual enrichment, cognitive development from being in nature, reflection, recreation, aesthetic experiences.
Places to relax, play, socialize, think.
Exactly. Opportunities for socializing, relaxation, physical activity, even fostering cultural identity and community belonging. The authors go on to argue, with a stark warning, that urban green spaces are undervalued and therefore under threat of being developed for profit-led purposes.
The threat of development.
Yes. This is a critical point because it speaks to how economic pressures and market forces can erode a fundamental public resource, a resource that is disproportionately relied upon by those with fewer private options.
That raises a really important question for us, doesn't it? As urban planners, policymakers, even just as citizens, how do we actively protect urban green spaces as a fundamental social good, especially for those with limited private space? How do we shield them from the relentless pressures of gentrification or development that could diminish access, quality, or even lead to their outright loss?
It's a constant battle, isn't it, between public good and private profit?
It sounds like it.
It absolutely is. And this study clearly shows the human cost when these public spaces are undervalued or lost. Protecting UGS means things like implementing stronger zoning laws, investing seriously in public acquisition and long-term maintenance, fostering community stewardship programs.
So it requires proactive effort, not just letting things be.
Definitely. It's about recognizing their intrinsic value for health and equity, not just their potential for commercial exploitation or their real estate value.
Okay. So we've looked through feminist, queer, migrant, and class lenses. Now, this deep dive into the experiences of international students in Berlin during lockdown, it offers incredibly valuable insights into how UGS function as crucial infrastructure for well-being, highlighting numerous vulnerabilities.
It really does.
However, we also need to acknowledge areas that, while incredibly important for truly inclusive design, weren't the specific focus of this particular study. That brings us to the ableism and disability justice perspective.
Right. And it's important to be clear about the scope of any study.
Exactly. So what does this study tell us, or perhaps not tell us, from that perspective?
Well, what's fascinating here, in a way, is that while this study provides a rich and nuanced understanding of many vulnerabilities experienced by a specific population group, young, likely largely able-bodied international students.
Given they were navigating a foreign city, university life, etc.
Right. It does not explicitly delve into the experiences, the access challenges, or the potential exclusion faced by people with disabilities in urban design and public space use during this time.
So no data on that in this paper.
No specific findings or interviewee examples within the provided text relate directly to ableism or disability justice. The scope of the research, focusing on international students aged 20-30, meant that this particular lens wasn't applied during the data collection or analysis. It wasn't part of their research question.
Which is fair enough. Studies have to have boundaries.
Absolutely. But if we connect this to the broader vision of creating a truly inclusive feminist park, which, let's remind ourselves, is the overarching concept of our show.
Aiming to dismantle all barriers to access and enjoyment.
Exactly. Then this lens of disability justice would be absolutely critical. A feminist park, by its very definition, seeks to ensure that every individual, regardless of their diverse abilities, can experience freedom, safety, and connection in public green spaces.
So what would that look like in practice?
Well, it means considering physical accessibility, things like ramps, smooth pathways, accessible restrooms, benches with backrests and armrests, but also sensory accessibility, maybe quiet zones, varied textures for tactile engagement, non-overwhelming lighting, and cognitive accessibility to clear signage, predictable layouts, perhaps designated less stimulating areas.
So accessibility in a really broad sense.
A very broad sense. This study, by its necessary scope, highlights some barriers and vulnerabilities, those related to migrant status, gendered safety concerns, queer community policing, and socioeconomic disparities. But it doesn't, and wasn't intended to, cover all of them.
It serves as a reminder that inclusivity is multifaceted.
Precisely. And that no single study can capture everything. This absence, if you like, serves as a powerful call for future research and for more conscious design practices.
So it prompts a question for future work.
Definitely. This raises an important question for future research and for all urban design. How can we ensure that the profound lessons learned about vulnerability, access, and the critical role of public spaces during a crisis extend to all members of the community?
Not just the groups studied so far.
Right. How do we build on these insights to ensure green spaces are truly liberating for everyone, including those with diverse physical, sensory, or cognitive abilities? It's about building a future where no one is left behind in the pursuit of urban well-being, and where our public spaces are genuinely inclusive by design, not as an afterthought.
So after this incredible deep dive into the Berlin lockdown experience of international students, seeing how urban green spaces became such a vital resource and, frankly, revealed so much about urban inequality. Let's bring it all home.
Oh, okay.
How do these findings directly inform and validate the crucial concept of the feminist park? What does this all mean for our vision?
Well, this study provides a really powerful empirical foundation for many of the core tenets of the feminist park. It doesn't just inform our ideas, I'd say it unequivocally validates the necessity and the benefits of such a consciously designed and managed space.
Okay, validates the need.
Yes. But before we dive into how it bolsters the vision, maybe let's just quickly remind ourselves, and you listening, that the feminist park isn't just about women, right?
At the short end.
It's about designing public spaces that are truly equitable, safe, and liberating for everyone, especially those often marginalized by traditional urban planning. It's about dismantling all barriers to access and enjoyment.
Okay, got it. So how does this Berlin study help?
Okay. First, in terms of informing design principles and goals, the study highlights the profound need for a diversity of spaces within a single urban green space.
Meaning different types of areas.
Exactly. Interviewees clearly expressed needing both escape, for solitude, quiet reflection, psychological restoration, and social melting pots for community connection, vibrant interaction, collective joy. Both things were important.
So not just one big open lawn.
No. A feminist park, therefore, must thoughtfully integrate quiet retreats for introspection alongside vibrant social hubs for collective activities. It needs to cater to varied individual and group needs, recognizing that not everyone seeks the same experience from nature or public space at the same time.
And those needs can change for the same person, too.
Absolutely. Needs shift. Second, and critically, the aggressive policing of queer gatherings that we discussed.
That quote from interviewee 6.
Yes, that underscores the urgent need for safety by design. And not just physical safety, but social and emotional safety.
What does that mean, safety by design, in this context?
It means a feminist park must be deliberately designed to ensure marginalized groups feel genuinely safe, visible, and, crucially, that they belong, not just tolerated or worse, targeted with discriminatory scrutiny.
So how do you design for belonging?
Well, it could mean actively designing against punitive surveillance, perhaps exploring community-led safety initiatives rather than relying solely on traditional policing models. It means fostering an environment of non-judgmental acceptance through programming, signage, community agreements, perhaps. It's not just about good lighting, it's about the very social contract of the space itself, creating an atmosphere where all identities are respected and protected.
Okay, that's a deeper level of safety. What else?
Third, the fact that interviewees often sought out urban green spaces further away tells us something important.
That proximity isn't everything.
Exactly. Accessibility goes far beyond mere physical proximity. Quality, variety, and the specific kind of environment offered are absolutely key. People traveled for the right kind of space.
So a feminist park needs more than just being nearby.
Right. It needs to consider not only geographical access for pedestrians, but also robust transportation links connecting it to diverse neighborhoods. It needs arranged ecological offerings, maybe different types of planting, water features, wilder areas, manicured areas, and spaces that cater to different physical, emotional, and sensory needs. It's about ensuring truly equitable access in all its dimensions, not just measuring the distance on a map.
Got it. Quality and variety matter as much as location.
Fourth, those issues of littering and overcrowding that interviewee one mentioned. They demonstrate the absolute necessity of robust, well-maintained infrastructure, especially if spaces are going to be used more intensely by more diverse groups.
So more bins, stronger paths.
Yes. Adequate and frequently emptied waste disposal, resilient planting that can withstand increased foot traffic, durable, thoughtfully designed amenities, benches, shelters, maybe water fountains that cater to a wide range of activities. A feminist park must anticipate heavy, diverse use and be built to last, with sustainability and resilience at its core. It needs to be cared for properly.
Makes sense. And fifth,
that consistent call for clear regulations from multiple interviewees, 5, 8, 6, is paramount.
clear rules about what's allowed.
Yes, because ambiguous rules, as the study implies with the policing incident, disproportionately affect vulnerable groups. They can be weaponized to justify discriminatory policing and exclusion.
If the rules aren't clear, enforcement can be arbitrary.
Exactly. So a feminist park needs transparent, equitable, and justly enforced guidelines that genuinely promote harmony and shared use, not confusion or exclusion. Importantly, these regulations should be clearly communicated and ideally developed in consultation with the diverse communities they serve, not just imposed from above.
Community involvement in setting the rules.
Ideally, yes.
Okay, so those are design principles. Beyond that, how does the study validate the very necessity and benefits of creating a feminist park? Why do we even need one?
Well, the validation is overwhelming, I think. The sheer positive emotional response captured in the study declarations that UGS were critical for my sanity during Corona, as interviewee 5 put it.
A lifeline for sanity. That's powerful.
Incredibly powerful. It confirms the feminist park's central role in providing psychological restoration and essential stress relief, especially for those facing multiple vulnerabilities. It shows these spaces aren't optional extras for mental health.
They're core infrastructure.
Yes. Furthermore, the fact that UGS became the only opportunity to interact with other humans for interviewee 1 and the new standard for social gatherings for interviewee 3.
Replacing cafes and clubs.
Right. This profoundly validates the feminist park's mission to foster social cohesion, build community, and actively combat the pervasive urban issue of isolation. Parks became the social infrastructure.
And the class aspect.
And for students in those shared flats with little or no outdoor space, the fact that UGS served as a vital extension of personal space, as interviewee 2 said, that directly validates the need for publicly accessible green spaces to address class-based disparities in housing and private green access. They are not a bonus. They are a fundamental right, compensating for other inequalities.
Okay. The study also provides theoretical context.
It does. That finding we discussed, that green space is not just an environmental but also a social good, aligns perfectly with the foundational premise of the feminist park.
How so?
It underscores that UGS are essential public resources delivering vital cultural ecosystem services like socializing, relaxation, physical activity, identity formation. And therefore, they must be actively protected from those profit-led purposes. It reinforces our argument that these are not luxuries, but fundamental human rights integral to a just city.
And finally, does it highlight challenges the feminist park aims to overcome?
Absolutely. 2 big ones stand out. First, the experiences of LGBT+ individuals being targeted reveal how existing power structures can weaponize public space, turning potential spaces of liberation into environments of fear. The feminist park explicitly aims to design against such exclusion, fostering environments where all identities are celebrated and safe.
Actively anti-discriminatory design.
Yes. And second, the problems mentioned like overcrowding, littering, coupled with unclear regulations, point to a failure of conventional urban green space management, a failure to adapt to diverse and intensified community needs, especially during a crisis.
Management couldn't keep up, maybe.
Perhaps. A feminist park would prioritize responsive, community-driven, and truly inclusive management models, where communities have a real voice in how their green spaces are run and cared for. It's about shared stewardship.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive really shows how during times of crisis, our reliance on and our appreciation for urban green spaces can just dramatically shift, doesn't it? Transforming them from mere amenities into essential lifelines for mental health, social connection, even personal identity.
It's a profound shift in perception forced by circumstance.
And the study even suggests that some of these new UGS use patterns are likely to remain, according to the authors. Things like consciously choosing to walk through green spaces more often, or taking lunch breaks outdoors, or maybe deliberately seeking out nature for stress relief.
Habits formed under pressure might stick.
It seems the pandemic, despite all its immense challenges, might have given many people a renewed and perhaps much deeper appreciation for these crucial public resources. What stands out most to you from all of this discussion?
For me, I think the study forces us to look beyond just immediate crisis response. It compels us to fundamentally rethink future urban planning and management. It raises that critical question. Given these findings, how can urban planners and policymakers ensure that future green spaces are not just maintained, but actively designed, managed, and protected to meet the diverse and evolving needs of all urban communities?
Especially the most vulnerable.
Especially the most vulnerable, yes. And not just during a crisis, but all the time. It's not enough to simply have parks on a map. They must be truly accessible, equitable, and safe for everyone. They need to become reliable pillars of everyday resilience, not just emergency resources.
So embedding this understanding into normal practice.
Exactly. And that article's powerful conclusion that urban green spaces are undervalued and under threat of being developed for profit-led purposes. That's a direct call to action for every one of us.
How so?
It challenges us to fundamentally reevaluate our perception of these spaces, to shift them in our minds and in policy from optional luxuries to non-negotiable public infrastructure for well-being, for equity, for social justice. Their vital role during a global lockdown proved they are not just nice-to-haves, they are absolute must-haves for any truly resilient, healthy, and equitable city.
They proved their worth under the ultimate stress test.
They really did. So, I guess I'd leave you, the listener, with this provocative thought to mull over. If urban green spaces became a memory box and a lifeline for sanity during a global lockdown for international students facing immense pressure, what kind of intentional liberatory design do we need to ensure there are always spaces of flourishing and freedom rather than just places of escape? How do we make them work like that proactively for every single person in our cities, regardless of their background, identity, or circumstances, every single day?
This knowledge is a tool, really. A tool for seeing your city differently, and potentially for helping to change it.
It's been a really insightful deep dive, I think. This document provides such a vital framework, especially for projects like the Feminist Park Project that are trying to build something fundamentally different. It shows just how interlinked urban design and social justice are.
It really does. But it also shows the scale of the challenge, right? It requires sustained effort, real commitment, and a genuine willingness to shift power dynamics in how cities get made and managed.
Definitely. It makes you think about how we ensure those voices, the ones that have been excluded, are actually heard and centered.
There's another quote from Sarah Ahmed in the handbook that feels relevant here.
Go on.
She says, "If you have to shout to be heard, you are heard as shouting."
That's powerful.
It makes you ponder, doesn't it? How can the design of public space itself work differently? How can it amplify the voices of those who've been historically silenced, ensuring their needs are met without them having to shout just to be noticed?
How can design itself listen? That's a really provocative thought to end on.
A lot to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.